Hi there, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the vlog. I want to give a big thanks to the YouTuber by the username Those Back Pages for suggesting that I make this video. Today I'm going to go into the various label designs through the history of Columbia Records, particularly their LPs. But I'm going to cover a couple other things as well. I previously made a video on the history of Capitol's centering designs. And this series may seem like total minutia if you're not super into collecting records. But if you are very much into collecting records, this information can be very important. It can come in handy in terms of just dating what pressing of an album you may have in your collection. Couple of disclaimers. First of all, I'm just going to go by my knowledge from years of collecting records. I may get a couple of things wrong. I'm going to put a link in the description to a site that does a really good job cataloging their history that is probably a little bit closer on the specific details than I am. And I'd also like to mention that all of the albums in my collection that I'll be showing you are Canadian pressings. They're pretty much exactly the same as the American pressings. Columbia is one of those labels that had pretty much the same designs in Canada as in the States, so that shouldn't make too much of a difference if you're watching this from America. So Columbia, of course, one of the oldest record labels in America and in the world, obviously was making a lot of 78s in the time before LPs. I'm not going to be getting too much into the 78s and their label designs. I just have this one for reference. I'm not sure if they went through a number of designs there, but Columbia was literally the first record label to start making LPs. They were one of the companies developing the microgroove technology, and their earliest LPs came out in 1948. The earliest Columbia album I have in my collection is this 10-inch LP from 1954 there. It's on a red label, which I thought was interesting. My 12-inch albums, at least the ones of the pop and or jazz variety, are typically on a more burgundy label, but yes, Columbia's earliest LPs and most record labels' earliest LPs were on 10-inch records, at least in terms of pop music, until approximately 1955, at which point you get these 12-inch LPs on the burgundy label. Columbia used this burgundy label without any of their famous eye logos on it that I can find. Until about 1956. So if you have one of these, it is most certainly from the 50s. I also have a Columbia Masterworks on a blue label. They had a few different colors for this style of label. A lot of record labels used to do that for depending on the style of music that was being issued. But yeah, for most pop and or jazz releases, it's on a burgundy label. And for Masterworks, which was the company that did a lot of classical music, but also all of the film and Broadway soundtrack albums. So many classics released on Columbia Masterworks. This particular one is the My Fair Lady soundtrack, and yes, it's on this blue label. But in about 1956, maybe slightly later in Canada, Columbia moved on over to the famous Columbia 6-eye label, so named for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 eyes on it. Yeah, collectors love the Columbia 6-eye. Record collectors love to obsess over the Columbia 6-eye records. They say that that's the peak of Columbia Records audio fidelity. I don't personally know if that's true. Maybe I'm not enough of an audiophile to pick up on the minute differences. But yeah, this record design was used primarily by Columbia from 1956 to about 1962, but some pressing plants continued to use this style of label until about 63 or so. Here's a mono album on the Masterworks collection label on this sort of gray label, but I also have a stereo one on this blue label. This must have been near the tail end of the Columbia 6-eye label. We're starting to get some stereo stuff, and like I said, Columbia only used the 6-eye until about 1962, maybe into 63. Then they substantially reduced the amount of eyes on their label when they went from, of course, the 6-eye 6i, down to the 2i, starting in late 1962, I believe. But yeah, like I said, some pressing plants didn't start using this style of label until 1963, and this was the Columbia design for about 7 years. This one's in stereo. I actually couldn't find a Columbia 2i album in mono in my own collection. But yeah, Columbia used this until 1970 or so for not just its pop releases, but everything. Here's a Masterworks on a gray 2i label. And yeah, they stopped using the 2i label in 1970, like I said, but you may notice that this is a copy of Janis Joplin's Pearl. This album came out in 1971. And the reason that it's on an earlier style 2i label is because, like I said, these are Canadian pressings in Canada, hung on to the 2i label for approximately another year. Not sure if that's across the board or just for certain Canadian plants, and I'm not sure if they were just late on adopting the new style or if they were just using the rest of their existing stock, but held on to that label design for a little longer. Also, as long as we're talking about the Columbia 2i label, I have a few 45s from that time period to show you just that Columbia was using a completely different style for their 45s of the time. There's Simon and Garfunkel Sounds of Silence on a totally different look than their LPs had for the time period. Here's an earlier sleeve design. Here's a later sleeve design with the same center ring label design. And then, yes, in 1970, Columbia rebrands again to this. You've probably seen a million albums that look like that, because Columbia used this label design from 1970 until pretty much now. Seriously, I've seen Daft Punk albums reissued, or Daft Punk albums released in the 2010s with this label design. Columbia has not looked back from this, which is kind of frustrating as a record collector, because it's hard at first glance to distinguish an album that's from 1971 from one that's from 1988, because they never changed that design. Also around that time, they went to this sort of design for the 45s with this ombre sort of red to yellow label. And at least in Canada, they were all issued on these CBS sleeves. CBS, of course, being the Columbia Broadcasting System and the parent company of Columbia Records. Hopefully that's been helpful to you all, just going through the history of Columbia Records from then to, well, still then, not so much now. But thank you for watching. I'm going to probably continue this series. I'm thrilled to see that people have been enjoying this little series of videos I've been making. I think for record collecting it is pretty helpful. Like I said, check out the link in the description to another site that has chronicled this stuff very well. Thank you all for watching. I'll have another video this week or next, and another inclusion of this series someday in the future. Thanks for watching. Catch you again soon.